Welcome to the Kidlit Distancing Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of Children's Book Insider, the Children's Writing Monthly, and we are going to have a really interesting discussion tonight. If you are brand new to us and you want to get on our list for not just our distancing social guests, but all the cool stuff we have coming up, and we'll be talking about a couple of those things tonight, you can get on our list. You can go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet, and you will also get a free ebook. We are celebrating our 30th year in business this year, and this ebook compiles our best tips for getting started writing for children over 30 years, and it's yours for free if you get on our list. So make sure you do that, and then you'll be informed of all the stuff we have coming up. And if you're interested in subscribing to Children's Book Insider and you are not a subscriber, we have a special deal for our socialites, $5 a month. writeforkids.org/CBI. And you will get the newsletter delivered to your inbox every month. It's about 20 pages long a month. Features market information, interviews with authors, editors, agents, lots of articles on craft and the business side of publishing. And you also have access to the CBI Clubhouse, which is our membership site, which has tons of info from 30 years of us doing this, including replays of webinars and all sorts of great stuff on there. So writeforkids.org/CBI. Oh, and a really cool feature of our newsletter every month is we do an interview with either an editor or an agent, and they give us a special above the slush code, special submission opportunity that you get to use when you submit to them in the subject line of your email, and you jump over the slush pile with your submission. That's a great deal. Okay, so every week we get to celebrate the successes of you. So I have two great ones this week. Rosie Pova's new picture book called Sunday Rain was published today. It's her book birthday by Lantana Publishing, and it was featured in Parents Magazine. Awesome. So congrats, Rosie, and happy book birthday to you. And Sheila Lewis writes that after writing for years with the help of CBI and our writing blueprints and all sorts of other great tools that she has found, she now has at least 3 manuscripts ready for the submission process. So yay, Sheila. Good for you for hanging in there and doing what you had to do to get those manuscripts in shape to submit. Congratulations on that. Keep us posted on how those submissions go. So I want to hear your good news. Email mail@writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line, and we will feature you on a future Kidlit Distancing Social. Any milestone you've reached that you want us to cheer for you and congratulate you and keep you going, let us know, and we will do that. So I usually have 1 or 2 links of interest, and this is a really cool one this week. Nathan Bransford, who's a blog, he was an agent, he's an author. I refer to him a lot. He's very smart. He wrote this great article, What is an Author Platform? This is a question I get asked a lot. And this article is great because it explains what a platform is, which types of authors need a platform, and what publishers kind of look for in your platform. And he really breaks it down for you. So you can either go to his blog, nathanbransford.com, and look for that article. It was just published a couple days ago. Or I gave you a direct link here, bit.ly/what is author platform. So however you want to get there. Okay. Now we're going to have a really interesting discussion here. I want to welcome my guest, Danny Alcorn, who is Chief Operating Officer of Writing Academy. Danny's our friend and our collaborator, and she is a Chicago-based screenwriter and communications designer. She is the author of the young adult novel, The Last Telepath, 3 screenplays, co-author of writing young adult fiction and adapting novel to screenplay, and as I said, chief operating officer of Writing Academy, which houses all kinds of amazing courses on writing and writing screenplays and self-publishing and doing all kinds of great stuff, many of which are taught by Danny. So welcome, Danny. Thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment, and then we'll get back to our slides here. Gardner says, I've already learned quite a bit. Wow, well, good. We haven't even started.
Buckle up.
Our work here is done, clearly. Okay, so let me give you a little background. We sent out this survey a few days ago, and many of you, I think about 250 of you answered, and we really appreciate those of you who took the time to answer the survey. If you didn't get the survey because you weren't on our list, that's okay. We're going to go through it on the social tonight. But really, the purpose of that is tonight is the beginning of a conversation that Danny and I want to participate in with you and develop over the coming weeks. We kind of went into this survey. We designed it with this belief that we have that we both serve writers. We teach a lot of nuts and bolts craft and stuff for adult and children's book writers. But we had this belief that a lot of the writers we serve are not satisfied with where their careers are. And we had some ideas why, but we weren't quite sure. And that's why we sent out this survey. And actually, a lot of our hunches were proved correct with the survey. But what we're seeing here, and we'll see this as we go over the results, it's not about a lack of craft and skill learning. It's about more internal issues that writers are facing. And so what we want to do is start having this conversation tonight. And this is actually leading up to a cool project that Danny and I are working on together. And I just want to quickly give you a little hint as to what it is. A top secret project that will be coming soon, and we'll tell you more about that in the coming weeks. And we are using the code name Operation Saucepot. Ooh, intriguing. So, like I said, we will tell you more about this in the coming weeks. But what I do want to say right up front is what we're going to be talking about tonight and what we'll be talking about in the coming weeks is not about things like visualizing success or creating a vision board or doing positive affirmations. Those are all great tools. And if you do those kinds of things, a lot of creative people do, it really can help them. And if that's working for you, great, keep doing it. But what we are exploring is discovering, again, the reasons why behind some authors are successful and others aren't or don't feel like they can get there. And what separates those two groups of people. And so this survey and our conversation tonight is really the starting point and an important part of our learning process, and I hope yours too. And I hope that you will have some interesting takeaways tonight from this discussion. So let's look at what we found on the survey. So the first question was, right now, are you satisfied with where you are as a writer? And 57% said no, and 40 said somewhat. So Danny, were you at all surprised by this answer?
Unfortunately, no. I have to say I wasn't. I mean, I, as you sort of teased at the beginning of this, we've embarked on Operation Saucepot because we saw this with the writers that we work with every day. Sort of this not feeling like a success, not feeling like they've reached their end goal yet, and on that journey. So I mean, I think it was maybe a little bit more drastic than I had thought maybe, but I wasn't very. What about you?
I expected it to skew toward not satisfied. I was, like I said, it's a bigger chunk than I expected, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, Don't worry, we got you. We're going to
Yeah.
help you. We're going to help you all move into the blue. The little
Yeah, if I had to
blue.
sum up our goal, I think with all of this, with this tonight and this, the conversation that we want to have is to drastically increase the slice of that pie that is
Absolutely.
that nice, cheerful blue.
Absolutely. And
That's
to
like,
those, right. And to those of you who are in that little blue slice, satisfied, good for you. I'm
yeah,
happy
awesome.
for you.
Pat yourself on the back for that.
Yeah.
That's
And,
if you
and,
are,
and we're going to ask you in a little while to give us your tips in the chat box. Maybe you have some of these great secrets that we're all looking for. So please participate in that discussion. Okay. Next one. How confident are you that you'll find the writing success you desire? And the majority here, 41%, were somewhat confident. And then 26% fairly confident and 9% were very confident. So I thought that was good that we have from somewhat to very confident the vast majority of the writers. That I found that encouraging. How about you?
yeah, definitely. And again, kind of, looking at this, I think it was more of a, I don't know if anybody else here is a statsy person, but as a also quick disclaimer, if anybody is doing the math, a few of these do not add up to 100 because I was rounding so that things would look nice tonight and be easy to sort of see in bite-sized chunks. But yeah, I mean, again, I'm hoping that by the end of tonight, people who were in the only slightly confident and not at all confident categories, will feel like they can shift up a category.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's nice to see that even though the levels of satisfaction aren't where people want them, there is still this sort of positive energy. I think that's one of the things that
Yeah,
we've also been talking
yes.
about.
The positive energy, and it's moving toward that confident side of the graph. And I love that. I love that. Okay. In your opinion, what are the biggest reasons some authors become successful and others don't? Now, we did have a write-in option that some of you used, and we appreciate that. We really do. These are the main, multiple choice that we gave you, and 75% of you said they have habits, attitudes, mindsets other writers lack. And that's the reason they are successful, which I thought was very interesting. The next biggest answer was they're extroverted or willing to promote themselves. And then they have industry connections and they work harder than other writers. Those all were very close. So these are all very interesting results, and we are going to circle back to this particular graph in a few minutes. But Danny, were you surprised at this answer that 75% had the first answer there?
What I thought was really interesting is that putting aside that habits, attitudes, and mindset answer for the second, the other things that popped up in the top 40% of extroversion, industry connections, things like that, that's what I hear from my students all the time when we're talking about what authors are. And so I
Sure.
was really curious when we decided to add that habits, attitudes, and mindsets question too. I wasn't sure whether or not people we're going to select that or not. So,
Mm-hmm.
spoiler alert, that's kind of what we're here to talk about tonight. So I'm
Sure.
really, really happy to see 75% of people
Right.
realize that that's a big part of author
Absolutely.
success.
And for those of you who didn't take the survey, this is one of those questions people could pick multiple answers, which is why it adds up to way more than 100%. But so I am not surprised at all that we have answer 2, 3, and 4 ranking in the 40th percentile. Those are also reasons I hear from a lot of our people as well. And so we can definitely talk about those tonight as well. So, what do you think? I want to hear from you in the chat box. Why do some authors become more successful than others? So, 75% of you talked about those attitude, mindset, habits. What does that mean? Give me your ideas here in the chat box. So Sarah says they have a strong agent, persistence, they don't give up. Does training have an impact? Sure, could.
Absolutely.
So they stay on course and don't give up, persevere. We see a lot of persevering here. They write better, they're committed,
The email list
outgoing.
is a tool.
Yep. Mailing list is a tool. Strict writing routine are also illustrators. Some are, but not all.
Yeah, not all.
They exercise the writing muscles. They send their material out. Yes, they're not afraid to submit. Consistency. Wow, lots of good answers here. Have support emotionally. Whoops. Um, these are going by fast.
Yeah.
Uh,
Habits and skills are important, but there are some inner blocks.
uh-huh.
Introspection.
Yep. They've mastered the how-tos. Excellent. Interesting answer there. Good work habits. Have a bankrolling person behind them.
It doesn't hurt.
Well, that allows you to write all day. You don't have to have a second job, but that doesn't mean you're going to get published.
No, definitely not.
Industry connections are cultivated and anyone can do this, but you still have to do the work. True.
I think that's really insightful. I think
It is very insightful.
that a
Very
lot of
insightful.
these, yeah.
So there are some categories here I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of persistence. I'm seeing a lot of perseverance. I'm seeing a lot of they're learning the craft. They're improving their skills. And these all fall into a certain category of effort that we're going to talk about. And then there's a few answers here that talk about things that are coming at them from the outside. They have time to write, or someone's bankrolling them, or they have connections. But as one person very astutely said, I can't remember who made that comment, those are things you can cultivate. So connections aren't just granted to you by some benevolent force. You have to go out and make them. And I thought that was a very astute observation there. Okay, so Sheila, this is excellent. She says publishing has changed and writers need to be up on what? Whoops, you sped by there on Sheila.
Publishing has changed and writers need to be up on what they can control
and can't.
Be persistent and flexible.
I love that. I love that. So let's keep that in mind as we move on to the next slide, because those are excellent points, Sheila. Okay. If you're not where you want to be, what's holding you back? Okay, so we were talking about these other successful writers a minute ago and what's they're doing. Now we're talking about you. If you're not where you want to be, what's holding you back? 35% of you said, I don't like promoting myself. Not a big surprise to me. How about you, Danny?
Absolutely not, since I also don't like promoting myself.
Nope.
I mean, who does?
Who does?
At least when you think of it that way. But yeah, I also just want to thank everybody for, who did this survey and, is here tonight and is kind of thinking about this, because this is kind of scary to think about.
It is scary to think about this stuff and to really, put it out there that, oh, this is what I'm doing, or this is what I'm afraid of. So again, we do appreciate you participating a lot in this, and being here tonight is another big courageous step, I think. Lack of guidance, or I don't know what to do next, is 32%.
I definitely hear that a lot. Publishing, any kind of publishing is, vast. There's so much to learn. Everybody has a different opinion. So I definitely understand where that comes from.
Yes, absolutely. Lack of experience or qualifications is 30%. Okay. I've had my confidence shaken by rejection. Absolutely. Lots of people feel that way. And I saw that on a lot of the write-in answers as well. What was holding them back is I've gotten rejected, or my work has been criticized in either a writer's group or somehow, and I can't move past that. So I think that is a huge obstacle for a lot of writers. And we can certainly talk a little more about that tonight, and we will talk about that in the coming weeks as well. Bad habits or attitudes. 23% of you admitted to that one, and I salute you for that, for being that honest. You can't fix it until you own it, right? So good for you. I got to move my window out of the way here. I'm too old, out of touch with readers, etc. 20%. I hear that a lot. Do you hear that from your clients, Danny?
Hear a little less than you, just because I also work with writers who are writing for adult audiences,
Yes.
and as adults they feel a little closer to that. But I definitely hear that, I think, actually most commonly with my young adult authors who are
Mm-hmm.
trying to capture that teenage voice. They feel
Mm-hmm.
confident tackling middle school and younger, but not the teenagers.
Right, right. Yeah, I think people who write for children or teens are authors are very conscious of their age a lot of times, or they feel like editors are going to be very conscious of their age. That's very common. Okay, I'm not talented, educated, or smart enough, 10%, and I don't want to deal with criticism. That goes a lot with that rejection, what we were talking about, having my confidence shaken. So let's look at these reasons here. And Danny, do you see any sort of pattern to these? Is there any way you can classify some of these reasons?
Well, the thing that strikes me as we have been sort of having this conversation, with each other, talking about our shared experiences of working with students and kind of the things that we're hearing, and now seeing some of this data in front of us actually, is that they sort of fall into two categories. There's these internal things like fears of not wanting to deal with criticism or being really
Mm-hmm.
shaken by rejection. And then there are these sort of external things
Mm-hmm.
that people feel like they can't control, like whether they're talented or how old they are, if they feel like they're too old for, agents or publishers to be interested in their books.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the pattern that I see emerging from this, is this internal and external hurdle
Mm-hmm.
of,
Mm-hmm.
how do you tackle it, how do you get over it,
Sure.
for what these are breaking down into.
Right. Danny, we had a request in the chat box. Is there a way to turn up your mic a little bit? Your microphone.
Me,
I mean, I can hear you fine, but one of our listeners couldn't. Maybe can you move it closer to you or?
that is exactly what I will do. I will move it closer.
Awesome. So I agree. There's this internal and external reasons here. External reasons that authors give themselves are usually things that they feel they have no control over. Now, you can't control how old you are. There's absolutely nothing you can do about that. Okay. When you have a reason like that where you can't control it, I feel the first thing you need to do is really look at it and go, is this real? Does this actually exist? Now, a lot of authors tell me, oh, I've run up against ageism. I can tell you, I talk to editors and agents all the time. Not one person has ever said they care how old the author is. They only care about the work. I have a very close friend who just published her first book last year at age 70. Okay. It happens all the time. So, my question to you is, why is age a factor in your query? Are you telling editors how old you are? Um, and if you are, why? They don't care. If your book has a voice that is relevant to today's readers, then the editor is not going to know how old you are. So some of these reasons that we give ourselves, if we really can look at them objectively, yeah, 5 seconds on editor and an editor agent will see your age, sure, but they don't. That's not why they're looking at you on social media. They want, as a comment in the chat box, they want to know if you have a social media presence. And the other thing I've noticed lately, a trend in new books, author photographs are old school pictures. A lot of authors are using like their elementary school picture as their author photo. So even the readers aren't going to know how old you are. And I don't know why they're doing that, if it's because they want to look younger or if it's because they think it's cute. I don't know. Um, but think about that. If there's something going on outside of you, I think there's a couple things you do about that. One, decide if it's real. If it's not, forget it. Two, if you feel it is real, then how can you work around it? Because we can't control what's out there, but we can control what's in here. So one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit in a few minutes is how do you take these external objections or roadblocks and make them into something internal that you can then act upon and do something about. So I can just tell you, if you write the most amazing manuscript that an agent's ever seen and you're 80 years old and you submit that manuscript and the agent thinks that they can take this book to auction and sell it for a six-figure advance, they're going to do it. They're not going to say, nope, sorry, you're too old. We're all going to pass up the money because you're 80. And in the children's book field in particular, there are many authors who start writing in their 20s and they keep writing until their 80s, until they can no longer write. No one's telling them to stop writing at a certain age because they're too old. So sometimes we give ourselves these reasons because there's really something else going on that we don't want to face. And this is an easy one to face. So what do you think about that, Danny? Is anything I said resonate with you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it is often a lot easier to point to something that is outside of our control rather than something that is inside of our control when we're, kind of up against a tough situation, whether it's a rejection letter or even just the fear of getting started because you are afraid it's too late. And yeah, I think if, and I don't think this just applies to writing by any means. I think that this is just kind of true in general as humans. It's easier to have external things that we can point at as like, this is my roadblock. This is what it is. And there's nothing I can do about it. Rather than kind of turning it in on ourselves and saying, okay, what's really happening here? What's my real fear, or what is my real sort of Achilles heel sometimes, and it might mean that your query letter isn't up to snuff, or your submission packet has been sent to the wrong set of agents and editors who aren't interested in the type of work that you do. And so I think it's brave when people are able to push past those external
Absolutely.
those external reasons, those external blocks. And I think everybody is entitled to feel a little bit of that right at first, if they've faced a setback.
Sure.
But then part of the success of authors is the ability to take that step back and look inside and be like, all right, what's really going on here, and address that.
Right. Sure. Well, and I think a lot of times these external reasons, whatever they are, whether it's age or nobody, my book is too conservative or too liberal or too whatever it is, it's really masking a fear that you are not a good enough writer, that maybe I don't have what it takes to actually be good enough to get published. And so it's easy to cover that up with, well, of course I'm not going to get published because they don't like me for this reason or this reason or this reason. That has nothing to do with my writing, and it's not fair, and da da da. So there's a couple. First of all, I think acknowledging that fear of not being good enough is very healthy and can be very freeing, because then once you see that, then you can start doing something about it. How do you get good enough? Well, Danny and I, have talked about this a lot. We feel talent is only about 10% of what takes you to success as an author.
Yeah, I want to bring this up because someone in the chat admitted, sort of confession time, that that's what they're afraid of. They read other people's books. I believe it was Beth, and she was saying, I read these books and I'm like, I will never be able to write that.
Sure.
Maybe I'm just not talented enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really brave thing to, to come to terms with. But yeah, one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that Laura and I have been talking about for the last year is that really talent is just this teeny weeny little spark. Honestly, it's probably just the thing that made you go, huh, I think I'd like to be a writer. That
Yeah.
sounds fun.
Yeah, exactly.
The rest of the 90% is skill. It's stuff that you've learned, it's stuff that you've practiced. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think most of us here, Laura and myself included, are used to thinking that in, like a narrow band in terms of craft. It's like
Mm-hmm.
your dialogue, it's your scenes, it's
Mm-hmm.
your, turn of phrase and things like that. But I think once you start to sort of widen the lens in which you're applying that talent versus skill to,
Mm-hmm.
what we've kind of discovered is that there are all of these other skills that you can nurture and develop to help you overcome these internal obstacles that you're facing.
Sure.
And
Sure.
it's not just luck, it's not just talent, it's not just being naturally resilient.
Mm-hmm. Right. And part of the trick, it's not really a trick, but the technique that really successful authors use, I believe, is they figure out where their skill set is, what they're especially good at, and they really leverage that. So maybe you're really, really, really good at research. You're just an amazing researcher. You might do better writing nonfiction because you're going to pull up these great facts and this information, and you're passionate about the topic, and you can figure out a way to make it really interesting for kids. Maybe your skill is not writing dialogue. Okay. However, maybe you are terrific at creating characters, and you can create full-fledged characters in 3 or 4 sentences that just spring off the page. It's amazing. I've known writers who can do this. You're going to want to write character driven stories because that's where your skill set is. And I see people in the chat box naming certain authors and saying, I'll never be that good. Maybe that is not the kind of book you should be writing. Maybe you are comparing yourself to someone who has a completely different skill set than you do. And, yes, we want to look at the people who are on the bestseller list and aspire to be that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there are thousands of writers who have great publishing credits, who have fans, who make money off their books. A lot of them make enough money to live on, and they're not on the bestseller list, but they have figured out what they do well, and they have really capitalized on that. And so Judy Bloom, I did an interview with Judy Bloom when the first year of my newsletter. And she said this to me. She said she started out wanting to write picture books. And she took a writing class and she thought, this is what I want to do. And her instructor very kindly said to her, you are not a picture book writer. You are a middle grade writer. And she listened. And that's why she's Judy Bloom. And that's why we all know who she is. And her books changed the course of publishing in a lot of ways. So some of it is, if you're banging your head against a wall, maybe you need to turn around and look at another wall that you can climb over. So these are just some of the things that Danny and I have been tossing around lately. Okay,
Yeah.
let's look. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that just kind of the way that I think of that is that, I believe that anyone can learn to do anything that they want if they're willing to put in enough time and effort. But
Sure.
the learning curve and the amount of time and effort that it might take Judy Bloom to master picture book writing isn't worth the amount of effort and time and heartache that would go into it when she could instead be Judy Bloom. Like,
Right.
that's not a bad alternative.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's one of those things where like I don't when I'm talking to authors who are struggling with this, where they're like, I really want to write this kind of book, but I'm really struggling with XYZ part of it. It's like, well,
Mhm.
is there a way to? It's that passion, I think, and
Mhm.
she wanted to be a picture book writer. And I have not spoken to Judy Bloom, but I imagine that whatever passion it was that was driving her to want to write picture books ultimately got translated into writing those middle grade books,
Hmm.
because the passion is it's even more fundamental. I think it's just,
Yeah.
what it is that keeps you going past all of the other hard stuff. That, it's why you're here tonight. It's why, you're part of writing groups. It's why you're,
Hmm.
working to establish, these skills and improve your craft and
Right.
your products.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And just real quick, and then we'll move on to the next question here. Um, you talked about the time investment, and a lot of people, when we were talking about age, said in the chat box, I don't feel I have enough time to learn. And then yes, the traditional publishing process is long, especially in children's books. It can take, even after your manuscript is purchased by an editor, if it's an illustrated manuscript, it might take 3 or 4 years before it comes out. And that can be very frustrating. Trust me, it's frustrating for people in their 20s. So, if you're in your 80s, you're like, I don't have this time. I know people in that situation who decided to self publish because they wanted their book out in the world. Now, then you have to market it. But again, you get to decide how successful, what success means to you at that point. Is success being able to have a copy of your book in your hands that you are proud of, that you worked hard on, that maybe you hired an editor to edit for you so you know it's in good shape, and that you can go to schools and read to the kids and show them your book, that you can give it to your family and friends, that you can have it up on Amazon? Is that going to fulfill you as a writer? And if you are, great. You can do that at 80 with self publishing. So there are options available to you that authors didn't have even 10, 15 years ago. And so that's another thing to always keep in mind. Smaller publishers, yeah, everybody wants to be published by Simon and Schuster, Random House, blah blah blah. You have to have an agent. You have to have a very commercial product for those publishers. A small regional press might be exactly the experience you need, and they may love your book and get it out faster, and you'll have a lot of personal attention. So there's a lot of options. And if you are open to saying, this is not going to be an obstacle, I'm going to figure out a workaround for whatever this is, then you will find other options to get where you want to go. If your dream of being published is still really, really important to you. And, one thing that I did want to say, and I'm not advocating this for anyone here tonight, but it's okay to decide at some point, this is not for me. And if you decide to turn away from publishing and try something else, that is totally okay. I mean, I've started lots of stuff in my life that I never, because I got into it and I'm like, this isn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. That's okay. So I think sometimes people get into this and they go and they realize that it is a lot of work, and they don't necessarily have the drive to see it through, but they feel bad about it, and so they keep pounding away and they're miserable. Don't do that, is what I'm saying.
And I think part of that too is that we assume there's this cookie cutter definition of what success looks like. And
Yes.
we think of there's a handful of authors every year who are on these bestseller lists, who are famous household names like Judy Bloom, Stephen King, and we think that's what success looks like. We think that we need to achieve that level of fame, financial success, whatever, to have made it. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things, Laura, that you and I have been talking about is that's just not true. Um, that and when you're saying that it's okay to decide that publishing isn't for you, I kind of think of that as like, I really enjoy cooking and baking. Do I want to open my own restaurant? Absolutely not. I want to be the friend that is like that everybody loves to come over in non-COVID times to their house for dinner and be able to whip up all kinds of different recipes and have fun experimenting and substituting things in. But that's about the level that I want to take it to. I want to work
Right.
out of my own kitchen on my own schedule, and I want to order takeout sometimes when I don't feel like it. I don't want to have a restaurant where I have to feed up everybody every night, whether I feel like cooking or not. And I think you can kind of apply, that's a little bit of a silly example, but I think you can apply that to lots of things in your life that you do
Sure.
for the love of it. Writing is one
Sure.
of them. And,
Hmm.
I work with a lot of self-published authors. And honestly, a lot of those self-published authors, they're so happy because they're not trying to do it full time. They like their day job. They enjoy their day job, but they have this passion for storytelling. And so they go through this that they have complete control over the editorial decisions and the design and everything like that. And at the end of it, they have this product that they're really, proud of and can share with people. And
Hmm.
I also work with one author who I think he's probably the happiest author that I work with. He writes children's books, and his goal was not to make money. His goal was to get lots of copies of his books into kids' hands. And so he set up his whole sort of like his whole launch, everything about it, like giving it away on Amazon, like just blasting the link out. And so, yeah, he's not rolling in dough, but when he sees the number of downloads that his book has every month, that's what fulfills him. That's why
Sure.
he's doing it. So I think that
Hmm.
that's kind of, some of these things too, just to go back to our, our slides here of like what's holding you back. Yeah, some of these things definitely. And I mean, Laura, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about various things like the talent issue and
Hmm.
what to do when your confidence is shaken by that rejection letter, because we all know if you're in publishing, the rejection letter is going to come at some point.
Right.
um,
Right.
but again, not using that cookie cutter definition of like, well, it
Yeah.
has to be XYZ, otherwise it's not worth it. I think it's
Hmm.
really important to take that for you,
Yes.
like what makes it
Again,
worth it to you.
we're talking about taking an external idea. Success must be this thing defined by whoever, not you. The world at large has somehow said to be a successful author, you have to be this. You have to be on the bestseller list. People, when you introduce yourself to someone at a party, they have to say, "Oh, you're a writer. I've heard of you, and I've read your book." It has to be in the display window at every bookstore you pass. I mean, and of course, those are all wonderful dreams to have. But if that is the only definition of success, that's something that was defined outside of you that you had no control over. If again you make it internal, you take it inside of you and you say, how can I turn this into something I have control over? You can decide what is my most important thing. If it's to actually hold my book in my hand and be able to give it to my grandchildren and read it to them, then you can make that happen. You don't need a publisher, Random House, to do that. Okay. And you can make that happen in several different ways. If your goal is, I want to someday be able to support myself with my writing, great. That's a really good goal to have as well. There are things you need to do to make that happen that aren't always just chasing the bestseller list. You need to create a wide author footprint, go after lots of different writing opportunities, maybe do some work for hire, maybe do some magazine writing, maybe, get your reputation going as an author. And then publishers will start coming to you with projects if you get your foot in the door with certain kinds of publishers. And a lot of career authors we know do that while they're working on their great novel that is going to take them 5 years to write. So, depending on how you decide to define success for yourself, you can then take control of that path. And it can mean a lot of different things. It can mean whatever you want it to mean. I see a lot of questions in the chat box about self-publishing, and I know Danny and I both on our sites have information for self-publishers. So definitely check out Writing Academy and our writingblueprints.com site, and look back in the replays of our distancing socials. I have had self-published authors on as well. You can get some information that way. Let's continue. We've still got some to go through, and we're getting through the hour here pretty quick here. So let's look at this next question. This was really interesting for us. What's your biggest fear as a writer? So we talked a little bit about this already, but this is an interesting pie chart here. 30% Let's see, Danny, how does this work out? The 29%, is that the blue?
Yeah,
I
the
won't
dark
publish
blue
anything
is I won't publish anything and feel like a failure.
and I'll feel like a failure. Okay. Then we come to I will never get noticed or won't leave a legacy. No one will read my book, even if it's published. People will dislike my book or criticize it. I only have one book in me. And then 30% of you had lots of other reasons, but they tended to fall into um, lots of categories of marketing was a big one. And we'll let's talk about that in just a second. I do want to mention to you all, we sent you, if you were on our list, a survey about 6 weeks ago asking you what webinars you would like to see coming up. And your number one choice was the Introvert's Guide. Let's see. Oh, the Non-Marketer's Guide to Marketing. And we are having that webinar on March 18th. So I will give you more information about that next week, but stay tuned. You asked, we delivered. So if that's truly your biggest fear, as you said, I expect to see you at that webinar. And we will show you what you need to do to actually become a marketer. But Danny, let's talk about another important concept of marketing and promotion. It's not just how do I go about writing a pitch letter, getting on podcasts, da 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 da. That's sort of the techniques of marketing that we're going to be talking about next week on our podcast or on our webinar. But there's more to it than that, right? I mean, successful authors, it's not just that they know how to market. Nobody's born knowing how to market, okay? Everybody starts in the same place. And by the way, the excuse of I'm an introvert doesn't fly because most writers are introverts, okay? But they still are able to market. And if you are an introvert, then you should love social media because you don't have to stand up in front of a group of people and talk. It's more like a one-on-one conversation with your audience. So that excuse is off the table. Okay, but let's look at promoting. Danny, what do successful authors do that we have found with the marketing that's beyond simply knowing how to do the nuts and bolts of marketing?
I think the biggest thing that authors who are good at marketing have done for themselves, which may not be obvious to an external perspective, but they've stopped thinking of it as marketing. They are not trying to sell anything. They're not trying to sell their books. They are just trying to make meaningful connections with their fans, with their readers. And it's sort of that thing of, if you make friends with someone and then you're like, hey, I have a book coming out, everybody wants to read it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like, oh, buy my book, buy my book. I have a book coming out. Would you like to buy my book? No, it's just that you've been forming these really authentic connections. And I think the other thing that people assume about marketing is that you have to be someone you're not. And that's just couldn't be farther from the truth. So there are some people who love social media. They post pictures of their craft projects, they post pictures of their pets and their kids, and they have lovely interactions with fans and everything like that, and then they just clam up and get so tense when it comes to promoting or selling something because they feel like, well, now I have to be super professional and this is just it's like,
Yeah.
no, it's still you, it's still authentic to you. It's just like making those connections and those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as you said, introvert or extrovert, it's just a matter of finding the communication channels that work really well for you.
So
And
it's, oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
no, go
Were you
ahead.
done? um, so it's really, it's communicating with your audience.
Which you
And
should
as a
already be good
writer,
at because you're a writer.
you're a communicator. All it is an extension of what you're already doing. So your first touch point with your potential readers is not buy my book. It should absolutely not be that. It should be, maybe you have a blog about something that you love doing that happens to kind of be related to whatever it is you're writing about. And you're just blogging about this, and you're building a following that way. Or maybe you are tweeting. We know so many authors who have these really fascinating Twitter feeds that have nothing to do with their books. They're just either really funny, or they're talking about something going on in the world or whatever, but people follow them because they're interesting to read. If you hate social media, maybe you, I don't know, what's some good non social media ideas for reach? Author newsletter. Okay, so you have to collect, you have to have some sort of website or blog or place to collect emails. But a lot of authors put together a newsletter once a month that they send out to their list. This not talking about their books, but for example, I have an author friend who writes mysteries, cozy mysteries, and a lot of them have to do with recipes, with food. And so she will put out newsletters with recipes that are going to be in her upcoming book. So people can start cooking the stuff that they're going to be reading about next month when the book comes out. So you can do all sorts of interesting things to be communicating. But as Danny said, it's as your authentic self. So whatever you are interested in talking about, that's what you should be talking about, whether it's through Facebook, Twitter, on a blog, in a newsletter, anything like that, as a way of starting to reach your audience. So, Danny, we've talked about how some writers have done some really unique, interesting stuff to build a fan base before their books even come out. Talk about someone you love.
She knows I'm a huge John Green fan. I do. I love John Green, and I mean, I love his books. Obviously, I think that he is just an author who absolutely fits in with the whole objective behind Operation Saucepot. Um, but he's so authentically himself. And if for those of you who don't know about Vlog Brothers, it's a YouTube show that he does with his brother Hank Green, where they send videos back and forth via the internet about cool stuff, just from history to science to, it's almost never about the books or anything like that. They raise money for really cool causes. They, like, sort of created this foundation of, like, don't forget to be awesome, as just sort of like their mission statement. And he's just so dynamic the way that he, like, makes these videos and educates people about really interesting and important topics. And so I think that you really feel like you know him, even though we've never met in person. It's something, it feels like a real sort of two-sided relationship, because he interacts with people a lot on the comments and the
Mhm.
and the things like that.
Mhm.
And so, I think everybody assumes that people who do video are really extroverted, but that actually isn't true if they're pre-recorded. Being live is a little bit anxiety provoking if you're an introvert, because you don't have a chance to pause and consider. But you can sit and talk for an hour at your camera at home with no one watching and edit out 2 good minutes.
Mhm.
So I think people underestimate or overestimate how much they have to be extroverted to really get a lot out of video.
Mhm.
So
I
yes,
agree.
there's so many different ways like that to be authentic. I was going to bring up Bailey Cates, if you didn't, about the newsletter with the. So you actually introduced me to her as a someone, since I
Mhm.
like to bake so much.
Yeah.
um,
So
so
yes, there's lots of stuff you could do. Melva asked, "What is the name of the
it's
video?"
vlog,
It's
VLOG.
Vlog Brothers. So vlog is a combination of video blog. So it's V, like in Victor, LOG Brothers, and you can just Google that on YouTube or go to YouTube and type that in, and it'll pop up. But yeah, great. And he's been doing that. They were doing the Vlog Brothers. Was it even before his first book came out? John Green's first book came out, or was it around the time of his first book? They've been doing it a very long time.
They have been doing it a really long time. I don't know off the top of my head if it started before or after Looking for Alaska came out, but um,
Mhm.
he certainly, though not an unknown author by any means, was doing it far before he was the household name that he became after The Fault in Our Stars.
Right, right. And someone made a really great comment going through the chat box here. If you don't like doing this stuff, hire someone. And that is an excellent point. Successful writers, one of the things they do, we talked about their skill set in their writing, and they focus on their strengths there. They also focus on their strengths as business people. And if you know that you don't want to learn social media and you have no desire to, and it's not in your skill set, hire someone to do it for you. Absolutely. But it's one of those things that if your definition of success is having people buying your book who aren't your family and friends, so getting it into bookstores, getting it into libraries, which yes, you can do that as a self-published writer. There are different ways to do that. Local libraries, national libraries, it's hard as a self-published, but often local libraries will take your stuff. But moving beyond the people who you can actually hand sell your book to, you are going to have to do some marketing. There's just no way around that. So I think the people who just accept that and then decide, okay, is this something I can embrace and make it a part of my job as a writer and try to have fun with it by being authentic and communicating with my readers? Or is it something that I'm going to wake up every morning and go, oh God, no, I have to get on Facebook? Then you hire someone to do it for you. Those are basically your two options. Obviously, if you're published by a traditional publisher, they're going to do some marketing for you, but not a lot. They're still going to expect you to do some of this. And we had last week on our Distancing Social as my guest was Colleen, who owns Itsy Bitsy Book Bits Promotion, Colleen Noyes. So you could go back and look at that replay from last week. And she had a lot of good information on marketing. Okay.
I think I want to make sure that we have time for the next slide, because that's kind of our big...
It's an important one, so I want to move on. Yes.
But one thing that I just want to say before we leave this slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, is so when I look at these like biggest fears and failures, as we said, we got a lot of write-ins. And so I think that makes a lot of sense, because everybody's journey is a little bit unique. Everybody's coming at this process, this goal from a slightly different angle. And so that 30% is kind of what we've been talking about now. But obviously this, I'm afraid I won't publish anything and I'm going to feel like a failure, or no one's going to like my book. I think that really gets at kind of the heart of what a lot of us struggle with as writers.
Yes.
And I think where people, and if you feel that way, it's not bad to feel that way. I mean, it's your book, it's your, it's your passion. And so I think feeling that just means that you care and that you are very passionate about it. And that's okay. I think where it trips people up is when they use it as an excuse to not try. And so I think that part of being a successful author is doing it even though you're afraid that this will happen. And it's like, there's nothing that you can ever do that I think will completely get rid of the little voice in the back of your head, but you can learn how to tame it. You can learn how to kind of coexist with it, rather than letting it sit there and judge everything that
Absolutely.
You never do it at all. And I think these are a little different than what we were looking at before, which were more external, because these are really internal. These fears are really like...
Absolutely.
And so you have control over how you react to these fears, whether you let them get in the driver's seat and prevent you from achieving the things that you want to achieve, or if you let them ride shotgun but are like, all right, nope, we're going to try it anyway. And if it doesn't work the first time, we'll try again.
Right, exactly. And understand that I think probably every author alive has had at least one of these fears, if not all of them. You can pick the most successful author you can imagine, and that person has been afraid of getting reviewed, of being criticized, of what if they don't like it? What if I can't write my second book? second book syndrome is huge. You have a bestseller, your first book, that's almost something you don't want, because then the expectation for your second book is that you're going to have to top that. Talk about pressure, you know. So Danny's right. Putting it next to you in the car, that fear, instead of letting it drive, is okay. It can sit there. You can say, okay, I see you, but I'm not going to let you take control. You're not taking the wheel here. Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's move on here. We got a couple important things to get through here. So we talked a little bit earlier about those internal and external obstacles. So here are some examples from your actual answers. And let's look at the external first, okay, just so we really understand this. So not having the space and quiet to write, I get it, you know, that could be an obstacle. Agents asking for your manuscript and then rejecting you, okay. Rejection, form rejections, time, again, we talked about this, time's passing me by, it's taking me too long, etc. So believe it or not, these are things that if you just look at them this way, you can't control them, okay? Or you can take these things and turn them into something you can control. So just these external obstacles, Danny, let's try to flip them into something that the person who has this obstacle can control. So not having the space and quiet in order to write.
So this one I think is very interesting. And at sort of the top of this too, we were talking about, is this temporary or is this permanent?
Right.
And in non-COVID times, I can think of lots of ways that you would address this issue. Does it have to be at home? Are you someone who can write at a coffee shop? Can you set it up so that if you've got, kids or pets or things like that that are distracting you, that a couple hours every week that they, get to go elsewhere? This past year, a lot of those things aren't options, and I totally get that.
Absolutely.
So again, it's one of those things where, there probably are still some things you could do if, you have a schedule that's flexible enough to allow you to get up or stay up later in the evening to have a couple of quiet hours to yourself. But yeah, that one was an interesting one that I did want to bring up just because we are sort of living through interesting times.
We are. And the nice thing is we're starting to move into spring. People, you'll have more opportunities to be able to work outside. And I know at least where we live, the libraries have strengthened their internet signals because a lot of kids, when they were being homeschooled, they didn't have internet at home. And so they wanted parents to be able to park the cars outside the library and kids to be able to get on the internet with their computers so they could log into the classroom. So I actually have done that when I just had to get out of the house. I'll take my laptop, I'll drive, I'll park in front of the library, I'll get in the back seat, I'll have my thermos of coffee, and I'll do some work. Now that it's getting nicer, I can actually sit outside at a picnic table and do that. But there are, if you really look around, you might have some opportunities like that. Danny mentioned,
That's a really great point.
And, a lot of people are sort of having these little pods where they have another family that they interact with, and you've both been very careful about social distancing, etc., but you're interacting with each other. Can you trade babysitting or with that other family, so that your kids are away for a while? I mean, there are, I know it's hard right now, but as Danny said, hopefully this is temporary and
yeah, that's what I think definitely like we are. I think we are spring is coming. We're generally moving towards, it being less of an issue, which is great. But yeah, I wouldn't let that stop you from trying to find these opportunities, like driving up to the library and sitting,
Right.
just sort of thinking outside the box like that. Again, take control of it. If this is truly the thing that is blocking you, what can you do to remove the block, or to, if you can't clean the house or make it quiet, how do you get out of the house?
Yeah, exactly. So let's see if we can whip through these, because we do have a little more stuff we want to get through tonight. So agents asking for my manuscript and rejecting me, form rejections, etc. So yes, it's hard when you're not getting feedback from the agent if it's a form rejection. That's where critique groups come in. You have to get feedback from other writers. So figure out how to get a critique group. There are online critique groups. There are critique groups if you're a CBI subscriber. We have uh, groups on our CBI website where you can find critique partners. Our blueprints have Facebook groups where people pair up for critique partners. If you join a writing organization, a lot of critiques are happening online, but they're still happening. So you need feedback. You can't judge your own writing. So that is something you can do. You can do something about the rejections. You can figure out why it's happening, and then you can fix the issues that you have with the book
That's
or your
actually
writing.
what I was interested with these two contrasting examples, because yes, rejection stings when you get the letter the first time. But if you take a step back and you look at these two situations actually make me look at different causes. So the agent
Mm-hmm.
who asked for the manuscript and then takes a pass on it, to me that says that there's something with the craft. Maybe that means it needs to go through another draft, or you
Sure.
need a critique group or an editor.
But the
Whereas
idea
if
was
you're
good
getting form
enough.
rejection,
The query was appealing enough that the agent
yeah,
asked for it. So that's a good thing. Yes.
exactly. It's like you've got a winner
Mm-hmm.
there. You just have to figure out what it is that, needs polishing or
Mm-hmm.
needs tweaking. Whereas if you're getting form rejection letters, it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with the manuscript. The manuscript could be great. It could be the query letter. It could
Yeah.
be that the places that you're choosing to submit to aren't the best fit for it. So
Mm-hmm.
that would make me take a step back and look at my submission packet and who I was targeting
Sure.
before I jumped to looking at the manuscript.
Sure.
And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's just, if you just see rejection and that wall and then you take control of it, you are like, all right, well, what have I learned from this? What
Sure.
can I flip? How can I flip my view of this from an external to an
And
internal
and
opportunity?
and I think that's an excellent point, breaking it down. What part of this was actually rejected? In the first scenario there, if the agent asked for the full manuscript, the query was not being rejected. Good query letter. Keep it. But then something happened in the follow through. So that's what you have to figure out. Whereas if you can't even get past the query stage, then you really need to take a big picture step back and go, is my idea not developed enough? Am I hitting the wrong audience with this? Maybe it's something the agent has seen. Maybe it's been done. Maybe it's not unusual enough. There's a lot of things that could go in there, and I think at that point, getting some outside input from critique group, freelance editors, etc., is really important, as well as um, you know educating yourself on what makes a great book. But sometimes you just need other opinions. The time, we've kind of hit that a lot in different ways already. But this one, my opportunity has passed me by, and by not writing for the past 10 years to hone my craft, I've wasted years of my writing life. Um, I think it's, if you feel like you've wasted your years because you haven't been writing for whatever reason the last few years, think about, there's still things that you have done with your life that probably will inform your writing when you get back to it now.
And
You
remember
know,
that, yeah, craft is not the be all end all of
it
what
is
it
not
takes
the
to
be
be a
all and
successful
all.
author. In fact,
No.
that's probably the easiest thing to sit down and learn how to do from a skills perspective.
Hmm.
So those 10 years that you've been having experiences, maybe you had a career in PR. That'll
Hmm.
be useful.
Sure, sure. But maybe you've experienced some really interesting stuff that'll be story potential for you. Maybe suddenly now you have, maybe you're retired and you have less pressure day to day, and that gives you more opportunity to just daydream, and that's going to open up your imagination. I mean, you have lived for 10 years. That is not wasted time. So, what can you take from that life that you've experienced those last 10 years and use it to inform and improve your writing and make it uniquely yours? And so, those are the kinds of things that I would start focusing on if you feel you're in that position. And as Danny said, craft is there's lots of ways to learn craft, but it's those intangibles that you have uh, amassed in yourself from these 10 years of living that are going to be even more valuable than
One of
that.
the things that was coming up earlier when we were talking about, what makes some authors successful was persistence and resilience. And
Absolutely.
those 10 years of life could very well have been developing your sense of those very important, again, they are skills and I think that they can be learned, but um, one of the reasons that those I think seem less obvious is that it's a little bit harder to wrap your arms around. Well, how do I sit down and learn how to be resilient? And there are ways, there are sort of trainings and things that you can do, but it takes time to get comfortable with it and things like that. But it's just as important as grammar or
Absolutely.
dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So now these internal obstacles, we've covered a lot of these already tonight. Personal challenges, that can mean a lot of things. Um, and as I said, sometimes you need to give yourself permission, if not to give up on writing, because I'm not saying you should absolutely do that, but to step away for a while if you need to. I mean, for example, if you've just had a baby, how you do anything besides take care of the baby for the first couple months of the baby's life is beyond me. I know writers who kept writing when they had a 3-week-old infant, breastfeeding every 4 hours. It's like, why? You need to be sleeping. So give yourself permission if you need to take a step away, knowing that you can come back if that's important to you. Marketing, we've already talked about. Uh, we've already talked about when I read current books, I see the quality difference. Okay. So use those books to learn from. We talk a lot in all of our stuff that we put out in Writing Academy and Writing Blueprints and Children's Book Insider about reading like a writer, using mentor text, learning from these great authors. You need to read them and break down the books. When does the character first enter the scene? How many words until we know what the character's problem is? How much dialogue is in on each page? How long do conversations go on before we start seeing some action? I mean, you can break down any book into its structural elements and learn from it. And that's how you should use those award winners and those bestsellers that you aspire to be. Use them as your tools to learn. And don't feel like you're a failure if you don't get to that level. You can still write an amazing book without it being a bestseller. There's a lot of stuff that goes into bestsellers, and it's not always quality of writing.
Yeah.
So, you know,
And just
take
to
that off the table.
back a little bit on kind of what you said, when we teach writing, we use
Mhm.
mentor texts all the time. We refer to the actual books that people have written. But I was thinking about this when you said, personal challenges could mean a lot of things, and it's very, very true.
Mhm.
But what we're going to give you guys as your little task tonight for your homework is to take that idea of using a mentor text and apply it a little bit more broadly to looking at an actual author, like the whole package of what makes someone a successful author. And I think it's intuitive. We know that we can read these award winners, we can read these bestsellers and kind of compare, as a measuring stick, like where do our manuscripts, but you can take a step back and you can do that with authors too. You can look at people who have already mastered things like Vlogbrothers. If you would do great doing, quick, witty videos like that, John Green has already cracked the code for how to do that and how to build an audience. And you can go and you can study that platform and kind of, not that you're stealing the ideas, but you just don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Mhm.
And so if you are facing a particular challenge, whether it's having a baby or losing a loved one or moving cities or, whatever it is that has come up, I guarantee that there is a successful author out there who has faced a similar challenge, and probably many of them, and discuss the experience and kind of, incorporate it, and you can learn from their mistakes. so you don't have to make them yourself.
Absolutely. Too many writers, when they're starting out, they feel they need to sort of reinvent the wheel. They need to figure everything out on their
Figure
own.
everything out from scratch, hire no one, do it all by themselves.
Absolutely. And, no, people have, people have already figured this out. Let them do the heavy lifting for you. And what you want to do is study what they did and how they did it, and then incorporate that into your life. And as Danny said, one of the homework assignments we're going to give you is to start doing this. And a great place to look, if you have favorite authors, go to their website and look at their bio. Very often they talk about how they got started, challenges they had, when they wanted to give up and then they didn't. I mean, a lot of authors are very forthcoming about that in their bios on their website. And so that's a great place to start looking for that kind of inspiration, information. Okay, I want to quickly go through the last couple things here because we are running late, which is fine. Thank you all for hanging out so long with us. So we asked you, do you know what your next step should be to advance your career? And 57% of you said yes. Awesome. Then we asked you, how confident are you that you can take these steps? And most of you fell into the somewhat confident to extremely confident category. Yay. Okay. So we were happy to see that. So what is your next step? So 75% of you said successful authors embody habits, attitudes, and mindsets that make them successful. And if you know what your next step is and you're confident that you could take it, what is it going to be? I want to hear from you in the chat box. Do you know what habit, attitude, or mindset are you going to incorporate into your writing life right now that's going to help move you towards success?
Yeah, based on kind of what we've been talking about here too, I think you guys have probably seen some, seen some things that you could tackle as your sort of next step. But yeah, we'd love to hear kind of what they are and how you're planning to make them happen over in the chat.
And if you don't know what your next step actually is, put that in the chat box. We're not going to call you out by name, but we really would like to know if you actually, now that we've had this discussion, we've kind of narrowed it down to habits, attitudes, and mindsets. If you don't know what that next step is,
like submit, and celebrate every rejection with a chocolate.
ha,
Yes, that is a great
nice
way.
See, and that is a great attitude. That is a great attitude. And Deborah, I salute you because you are taking this great attitude and you're turning it into action steps. So good for you. Work on the revision inquiry letter more consistently. Nice, Chris. So that is a great action step. Linda says plant butt in the seat and write. Excellent. These are going by really fast here.
Butt in chair. I like that.
Butt in chair. I saw someone said about setting a goal every week or something, which I think is a great idea.
Yeah, that's nice and bite-sized too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that allotting daily time to write and revise, that's really good too, because that makes it actionable. That's a very concrete thing that you can also measure your progress against.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And treat my writing as a priority and watch less TV. That sounds good, but it doesn't have to be no TV. Sometimes there's good inspiration there.
We give you permission to watch TV. And actually, yes, you can get a lot of inspiration if you watch good, well-written TV shows or movies or documentaries or whatever. It can actually trigger some great story ideas.
I mean, I am biased as a screenwriter by training, but...
Oh, that's right. She's a screenwriter. Get into a critique group, learn to blog. So you've got a lot of you have some really great goals here. Some of them are pretty big, which is fine. Like getting into a critique group. Yeah. how can you break that down into smaller steps so that you can feel successful? Um, for example, I'm going to join 2 writing related Facebook groups this week. And then I'm going to start commenting on other people's posts, writers who I admire or people who seem connected in the group and know what they're talking about. I'm going to start following them and committing. And then I'm going to start adding, posts of my own to the groups that are of interest to everybody else in there. And then I'm going to put a post out and say, does anybody want to trade critiques? So those are small steps that you can break this big task down and give yourself one a week. And think about something like that works double duty. You are getting connected in the writing community. You are looking for a critique partner, which could then turn into a critique group down the road. And you are starting to get your name out there in a friendly way. You are starting to build connections and communicating with people who down the road may actually help you market your book. So 3 birds, 1 stone. So there's a lot of really, really great ideas going here in the chat box. So good. I'm so glad that you have these goals. So we are actually really happy to see this because, and I know the people who are here are especially motivated. So you are like the cream of the crop, which, I want to give you kudos for that. What Danny and I have found when we sort of talk to other writers, a lot of other writers, is they may identify that, yeah, it's these habits, attitudes, and mindsets that these successful people do that are important. And then they may say, oh, yeah, I know what I'm going to do next. But then when we say, okay, tell us, there's a disconnect. And so a lot of times people might equate knowing what to do as simply learning more craft. And that's craft is important, but there is more to it than that. And so I'm glad that a lot of you are starting to see that with some of your comments here. And those are the kinds of things that we will be continuing on with this discussion in the weeks that follow. So before we get to the rest of the homework, do you have anything to add to this, Danny?
I don't think so. I'm really excited to see kind of everybody feeling energized over in the chat.
I am really excited about this. Yes. Yeah. Very, very good comments in the chat. And those of you who are watching on replay, I'm sorry you can't see this fabulous chat box.
Yeah, for those of you who can't see, it's just a lot of people who are, feeling really energized and like ready to commit to, kind of upping their game when it comes to, how much time they're spending writing or, biting the bullet and sending out those query letters, submit. It's just really great to see. So
yes, very, very good. Okay, so Danny told you about one part of your homework, which is looking at some authors you admire and trying to see if you can start breaking down what's their secret. What do they do that has gotten them to this success? And how can you do it too? Remember, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let them do that. They've done the heavy lifting. You figure out what it is, and then you just duplicate it. So that's part of homework. The other one is this. We want you to make a list of up to your 5 biggest obstacles to writing success. And a lot of you mentioned those on the survey. Maybe you've thought of more as we've talked tonight. And then mark each obstacle is either internal or external. Something that's happening inside of you or something out here that you feel you don't really have control over. If it's external, is it really an obstacle? Is this something that's actually there, or are you using it as an excuse because you don't want to really face the internal obstacle that is far scarier? And we understand that. Trust me. But once you can remove that excuse, then you can actually do something about the internal obstacle. But if it is real, yeah, I'm getting form rejection letters. Those are actually showing up in my inbox, okay? How can you make this into an internal obstacle that you can then act upon? So as Danny said, you look at what part of the process is the rejection happening. And then you break that down and you go, what can I do about this part of the process? My query is being accepted. That's getting some good response, but my manuscript isn't. So now I have to work on this. What do I need to do with my manuscript to improve it? Do I need to learn something more about my craft? Is it that I'm hitting the wrong age group? So it's a marketing, I'm positioning it wrong in the industry. Maybe I need to learn a little more about the different age groups so I can better position it. Is the idea not commercial enough? I'm hitting the wrong kind of publishers and agents. Maybe that's not coming, maybe here's one that I see a lot. The query letter promises something, a certain kind of book, and the manuscript is something totally different. So maybe your query letter is implying that it's a very commercial product and you're targeting big commercial publishers, but the manuscript is really a much more literary book that might appeal more to a small press. So you can do something about all of those things once you figure it out. And if it is internal, list 3 action steps you can take to working around this obstacle. You guys have done some great work already tonight in the chat box with the action steps. Break it into small steps and you will have much better success. All right, Danny, anything else before we sign off?
No, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you and everyone in the chat over the last hour or so.
Yeah. And remember, if you're still feeling like, oh, I don't have a handle on this, this is still too much, we've got your back. Okay, this is the beginning of the conversation. And Danny and I are working on something that is going to really go into deep dive with this stuff, but she'll be back and we will continue talking about this with you. But I want to hear from you, those of you, if for my celebrate section next week, if you have taken anything from this tonight and if it's helped you during the week with your writing or your mindset or anything like that. If you have, drop me an email and we will celebrate with you next week. Okay? Oh, can we show the internal versus external again? Yes. Let's see. Here we go. So basically, the difference here is external obstacles are things happening outside of you that you feel you don't have control over, but actually you probably do.
The bold statement I would make is that there are almost no real external obstacles.
Right.
Almost all of them can be reframed as internal obstacles.
Right. And internal has to do with something inside of you. It's very much an emotionally based obstacle. And if you can really face that, which can be scary to really, really face it. But when you do, then you can say, okay, how can I act upon this? What can I do about this? And then you break it down into small steps. Whereas if it's happening outside of you, you may feel like you can't act upon it because you have no control over it. But as Danny said, there's really very few actual external obstacles. They're just smoke screens for our internal frustrations. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. This was great. And thank you for participating in the chat box and giving us so much great feedback. We really appreciate it. And go forth this week and do amazing things. And we'll see you all next Tuesday. Bye.